Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the webinar about the DNS4EU project. My name is Magdalena. I'm the marketing manager for DNS4EU at Wellbone, and I'll be the host of today's session. Before we start, let me provide you with a brief overview of today's agenda. So we will start with the project introduction, and it will be Adam Nyerka, technical consultant at Whalebone, who will guide you through the main principles and through the pillars. Then we will dive into the legal aspects with our ICT lawyer at Timelex, Hans Kroh. And finally, we have Lorenzo Bracci, the account executive at Whalebone, who will present the implications of the project for ISPs. I, of course, encourage you to share your thoughts, your comments, your questions to the chat, and we will go through it either during the presentations or at the very end of the webinar, as we have there also a slot for the questions and answers. Last but not least, I want to express my gratitude to you, to the participants that you joined us today. And also, I would like to thank the EuroISPA who initiated this webinar and who helped us keep you well informed about the project, about the trends. So now I would like to pass the word to Diego Nagore, the policy executive at EuroISPA, who will share his thoughts at the moment. So Diego, please.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your kind words. As you mentioned, I'm Diego Nagore, Policy Executive of EuroISPA, the European Internet Service Providers Association. EuroISPA was founded in 1997 and represents over 3,300 ISPs from across Europe, all along the Internet value chain. And we are actively engaging and campaigning in Brussels with policymakers on behalf of our members, national associations, and a wide range of industry members as well on online content moderation issues, data economy, cybersecurity, and internet infrastructure matters. And our position here in Brussels are very valued by policymakers as we represent a wide and broad membership, and as well due to our technical expertise of our members. So I'm very happy to be here today. And also on behalf of our Vice President, Lars Steffen, I would like to thank Whalebone for the organization of this webinar. And I would like to mention on his behalf the ICANN 78 meeting in last October in Hamburg, where the ISP and connectivity constituency organized the outreach session, and also Whalebone and DSEC gave a general introduction on the DNS4EU and an update on the current status and of the project and its implementation. So Lars told me that you had an interesting discussion, and this webinar will be a nice follow-up to that. And I'm very happy to see many of my members here. So I hope they have many questions and you can come back to us. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your kind words. And now I would like to ask the first presenter, who is Adam Nyerka, if he can share his presentations and his slides with us regarding the project. Adam, floor is yours.
Thank you, Magda. All right, so welcome everyone, also from my side. My name is Adam Merka, and I'm the technical consultant here at Whalebone. And today I would like to present to you DNS4EU as a part of Europe's cyber defense and cyber resilience strategy. So on the agenda today, during the presentation, we'll go over the scope of the project, its applications, with some focus on the threat intelligence aspect, which is working in the backend. Our plans on how to build an actionable information sharing platform between the participating organizations. And furthermore, we'll also discuss the applications of DNS4EU and how it can be offered to different end user segments and verticals. So 6 brief bullet points. I think I have 25 slides, but I'll try to be quick. So let's consider the following facts. The first one is that nowadays there are around 15 billion connected devices. And this number is only expected to grow to 24 billion by the end of 2025, which is kind of a security nightmare, trying to protect every single one of them, considering also the variety of operating systems and platforms. So you can imagine that some people are getting a bit nervous. On the other hand, industry-wide research shows that more than 94% of attacks rely on DNS at some point of the cyber kill chain. So whether it's during the reconnaissance phase or during command and control or later in the exfiltration or impact phases. So the rational question might be, is there any common denominator? Is there something we can apply at scale? And the answer is, of course, yes. No surprise there. This reasoning gave birth to the notion of protective DNS, PDNS for short. What is it? It's the viewpoint that DNS should not only be the communication protocol, but also a security layer or a security service. Implementing and filtering the DNS requests and blocking access to malicious domains is a really easy way to establish the first line of defense by blocking access to phishing websites, detecting malware communication, as well as providing real-time insights to the security teams who then act on these insights. The number of incidents can be dramatically reduced, and also their severity can be reduced if we stop the kill chain early on in the life cycle. So the main purpose of the protected DNS can be summarized as a reduction of attack surface while not disrupting the comfort of the user. And this is precisely the solution that we're trying to build here, that we've already built and now trying to offer it to the entire continent. Right, let's continue. Now, so about the DNS4EU project, what is it actually? The goal of ENISA, who has been the organization which opened the tender for this, is to provide a safe, stable, and private internet for Europe, and to then strengthen the digital security and independence of the Union with two main focuses. The first one is that the data is kept within the European space and protected by the European legislation, while at the same time also guaranteeing the user privacy. We're also contractually obliged not to use the data for commercial purposes, and it's a commitment we intend to keep and only use the data for improving the blocking algorithms and the filtration capabilities. The challenge of ENISA when they kickstarted the project was that the European governmental institutions and citizens were not very well protected, and the reaction to newly emerging threats was slow. There are some options which either organizations or users can take advantage of, but the problem with these is that they're mainly located outside of the European legal space, also physical space, and there is quite a lot of data brokering and using it to commercial purposes. So the solution obviously is to create an independent EU-based DNS protection with real-time reaction to emerging threats and easy distribution to citizens and institutions. More on that later. This, of course, is a major undertaking, and although we have built the technology and we are the project leader, we need help with lots of other aspects. This means that there's an entire consortium of members who are involved, each in their own area. Just to name a few, the Czech Technical University in Prague, specifically their Stratosphere Labs, is helping us with improving the neural networks and the algorithms that identify the threats early on, while also minimizing false positives. Then Timelex, we'll have another speaker today from Belgium, and then DSEC from Germany. They're helping us with uncovering the certificate transparency and registration. And there are others, as well as some associate partners. So now about the threat intelligence, how does it actually work in the background? This is a great oversimplification, but you can imagine the filtering as a funnel where on the input side, there's a data processing at scale, while on the output is the shielding of millions of everyday users and organizations. If we look at it in more detail, just to give you a brief hint of the DNS4EU threat intelligence lifecycle, it aims to recognize and stop malicious domains in the very beginning. So this means that the dark blue arrow, an early detection and monitoring and evaluating of the domain registrations and certificate transparency. In this task, we're also cooperating with the consortium member, the NASK, the Polish CERT, and we're developing a machine learning model on the data from the national TLD domain registration. And the aim of this is to deny the attackers the possibility to use the convincing looking domains like .cz, .de, .gr, the nation state or the national domains. This allows us to catch the obviously malicious or impersonating domains before they're even used in a campaign. And also we have already in place some monitoring of domains that are typically used for scams or malware activity or phishing campaigns. Those are the unusual domains like .top or .xyz and others. These are usually not governed by a organization like here in the Czech Republic is the CZNIC or DENIC. So the permissions to register a domain in these regions is the attitude is a little bit more relaxed. The second aspect in the first stage, still in the dark blue arrow, that's the light blue arrow, is the threat intelligence sharing channels. It's the collective effort not only of the consortium, but all the institutions who want to participate. CERTs or cybersecurity incident response teams, but also commercial entities like banks or retail or parcel delivery services. We cooperate with a large portion of them, as well as nationwide mobile carriers who are providing us with malicious domains that they observe. Then moving on to the light blue arrow, the analysis of the actual traffic is also a vital source for detection, from which we can recognize malicious patterns from the traffic, while also allowing fast, almost near real-time evaluation of unknown and previously unseen domains. This helps us with detecting otherwise problematic cases such as DGA domains that are randomly generated, or DNS tunneling, which is often weaponized to exfiltrate information from organizations or individuals. And on top of that, we are also watching for parked domains that have been registered a long time ago and only suddenly started serving for some malicious purpose. Which brings us to the last step, which is the feedback, and that's to prevent the false positives and improve or tune the detection algorithms so that we do not disrupt normal user activity or normal behavior patterns. We aim to have the number of false positives as close to zero as possible, and on this task we're also cooperating with the Stratosphere Labs, as I mentioned before. Then we aim to provide and encourage a collaborative effort because sharing is caring. Not only throughout the consortium, but throughout all the institutions, both public and private, to participate and share the reports of malicious phishing campaigns, malware activity, and so on. We want to make the process and options as simple and fast as possible for everyone. We don't want to use emails because the key in this threat intelligence sharing is speed and automation. reported domains must reach the resolver within minutes of discovery, including the check from the neural networks on our side. And this is what we're already putting into practice, as several of our customers can attest. We'll offer several endpoints, and so let's take a look at one of them. The first and foremost is MISP, which stands for Malware Information Sharing Platform, which is a open source threat intelligence sharing platform. It works in a distributed manner. So every participating organization can create a server and either consume the data from us or also forward the threat intelligence data about their discoveries to us. So any CERT or cybersecurity incident response team or commercial subject can run their own instance and then connect to us via communities. It also allows sharing not only domains, which is the primary indicator of compromise that we work with, but also other IOCs as URLs, IP addresses, malware samples, and others. The MISP platform allows for granular settings of sharing the indicators of compromise, and organizations may decide to share their findings with either everyone or just their subset of, let's say, friendly organizations of their sub-community. So this is something that we want to accomplish, a situation where all the participating organizations are putting the threats in real time, pushing the threats in real time. So if a malware campaign is detected, let's say in the Czech Republic, the information is immediately pushed to Portugal, Romania, Poland, or all the organizations that are partaking, and in effect shielding all the users who are using their DNS. I have a few examples here in terms of threats we have stopped in the past. I'll try to quickly skim through them because I'm running out of time. The first example is a fake post courier. This was discovered in Luxembourg. It's a phishing site which leads the user to some credit card gateway, and under the pretense of sending them something, they lure the money away from them. This is only, as you can see, almost 48 cents. But if this is done on a scale, it actually presents a lot of lost money. Second example is a threat that we've discovered after deploying our technology to one of our customers. This was a infected access point, specifically 2 Ubiquiti devices that have generated over 3 million malicious requests in 2 hours. So for all of you from the EuroISPA, this might be a use case that you might be interested in, because we not only protect the end users, but this also has a case with protecting the infrastructure that ISPs are using to deliver their internet to their users. The last example is a phishing from the Czech Republic. During the coronavirus epidemic, we had our Ministry of Social Affairs agree on some money being awarded to all the citizens for as a benefit or something like that. And of course, hackers quickly learned about this. They faked a site, and they then required the users to register for some fee, which again, if achieved on a large scale, they could have caused some serious damages. So now, regarding the challenges, the first challenge is the distribution. We're already protecting a lot of people throughout Europe and the world, but this is what the telcos and ISPs help us with. This is our main distribution channel, and it's simply because of the scale that we're able to achieve with rollout through these organizations. We're already covering millions of users. The second distribution channel is DNS4EU for governments. This is or might have a hierarchical structure with multi-tenancy. So the national certs or ministries can partake in DNS4EU by rolling this technology out to hospitals, municipalities, or other nation-state organizations. And the last pillar is the DNS4EU for public, which has pure, unfiltered, or has options. The first one is pure translation without any filtering. It has an option for protected translation, or there are other use cases like adult filtering or ad filtering. Challenge number 2, and this is something that we're already covering with the MISP and with the real-time propagation of the indicators of compromise to all the resolvers. That's the problem of slow reaction times. Yeah, so you can imagine the situation where some threat intelligence specialist at a CERT discovers a new campaign and tries to warn all the organizations that he can not to become victim of this. And the usual situation is that somebody's on vacation, they don't have the time to do it, and basically there's a lot of space for the attackers to already impact the operations of that organization. So this is what we're already serving. The last challenge is to onboard enough cybersecurity incident response teams. There are 556 of them recorded by ENISA. Some of them have already joined, but our goal is also to market this to others and convince them to join. Now briefly about the high-level timeline. We have already kicked off the technology and security and compliance designs. This year, we'll be focusing on regional threat intelligence setup. So we're already in talks with some of the certs, and some of them are already consuming our threat intelligence, and we're enriched by theirs. What's also scheduled for this year is legislation and security requirements. And in the coming years, in 2025, we will begin with attracting the end users through discoverability, active marketing campaigns, and we'll also scale the deployments as needed. And since 2026, the project should be self-sustainable and continually improving. If you're interested in more details, we will be very happy if you decided to join the DNS4EU or browse through any of the materials that we have to offer, either on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. That's it. And if you have any questions, I think that Magda will translate them to me, or I'll just stop sharing and read myself.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, for a very insightful presentation. There is so many questions in the chat, so I'll give you time to go through them if you can, Adam, and try to answer them in the chat. And of course, if there are some, we can discuss it at the very end during the question and answer panel. The one question that I can answer right now is if we will be sharing the slides. Yes, we will be sharing the slides after the presentation with you. So so you'll get all the materials and all the slide decks that we're showing today. So thanks again, Adam, for your thoughts. And if I may ask, Hans Gro is the ICT lawyer at Dynalex, and he will now share his presentation about the legal aspects that are related to the project. So Hans,
yes.
the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So indeed, my name is Hans Gro. I'm a lawyer in Dynalex, a Belgian law firm that specializes in innovation law, digitization, digital communication, data protection, information security, those kinds of topics. And we are the legal partner in the DNS4EU project. I want to explain some of the some legal challenges that we're facing, some of the policy context behind this, and also to explain a little bit where the on what different fields our solutions are relevant and what we can and cannot do. And this actually touches on some of the questions that have been raised in the chat, including who actually determines what is malicious, and whether or how at some point DNS4EU technologies will become mandatory and have to be adopted in the European Union. We won't have all the answers to all of those questions yet, but I'll try to explore what I can. So maybe firstly to shortly look at the general legal and policy context. Most of you are familiar with this, but I think this is probably mainly useful to give an insight into some of the legal challenges that we have to face, a lot of which, as you know, boil down to the fact that not a whole lot of this is regulated or harmonized or standardized at the EU level. And we have to deal with a very broad range of legal frameworks that interconnect here. The policy context, like this is something that everybody is aware about. Within the EU in general, there's a very significant concern over the last couple of years. The trend is clearly towards focusing more on digital sovereignty, about for strategic assets in the European Union, building on well, fundamental rights is one driver behind that, making sure that we don't rely on technologies from countries that don't take fundamental rights very seriously, but also looking at it more from a business side, from an economic side. The European economy, the digital single market, shouldn't be overly dependent on the goodwill and on the cooperation of non-European entities. That's sort of a big policy concern in general, and that applies to the European Union's strategy towards DNS as well. The EU cybersecurity strategy for the digital decade was adopted at the very end of 2020, so it's getting a little bit old by now, but it's still the sort of the fundamental driver behind the DNS4EU project as well. And it's not the first strategy, but at least one of very relevant ones that explicitly noted that the DNS is a critical infrastructure for any economy, also for the European Union, and that cybersecurity of the DNS system is a major global risk for which, again, we cannot rely as European governments, as European businesses, as European citizens. We cannot rely on non-European stakeholders that might not have particular interest for European fundamental rights and for European economic development. So for a lot of strategic systems, and includes a lot of non-DNS systems as well, like for cloud computing or similar concerns, but for DNS as well, there is mainly the concern that over the last couple of years, there's been a trend for consolidation among DNS service providers, DNS resolvers, and that many of the major players are not European. So much, this is really comparable to IT infrastructure in general, looking at cloud computing, where there's a large dependence on European stakeholders. And this is actually also where the DNS4EU initiative was announced under that specific name, with a specific policy to provide an alternative European service for accessing the global internet in compliance with security data protection standards, and being a part of the Industrial Alliance for Data and Cloud within the European Union. So it was very much embedded within that whole sovereignty form of thinking. So that's very clear. Everybody's on board with that probably. There's very little to argue with. So why is this complicated? And this is sort of this very quick summary. This is like a one-slide summary of all the different legal challenges that we have to tackle in the project, and that many of you have to deal with as well. So the general red thread is that DNS specifically is not traditionally something that's very highly regulated, like the internet in general. Governance of the internet and of the DNS system is stakeholder driven. It's private organizations, nonprofit organizations, academic institutions, research institutions that determine and that draft the rules based on their own understanding and on their own designs for how the internet should function. You don't really have a lot of legislation, neither nationally nor at the European level, on how the DNS functions. We do have massive amounts of legislation, however, that affects what the DNS can and cannot do, and what you are and are not allowed to use it for. I think these are probably the main ones that I have on the slide right now, but I'm sure people will be able to raise their hand and say, actually, you're still missing one, simply because there are so many. Right now, for critical infrastructure, network, and information security legislation that we have there is very explicit on the fact that DNS is an essential service and that it must be effectively protected. This was actually very explicitly stated in the NIS2 directive. We'll get back to that a little bit more later on, where it is being very clearly stated that the European Union there needs to take measures to take, I was going to say to take control over the DNS, but that's not the reality, that's not the intention, but at least to make sure that it is not entirely dependent for this critical infrastructure on non-European stakeholders. That's clear. What's less clear, obviously, is that at the European Union level, we have, as you all know, very strict data protection legislation that governs how you can process people's personal data, including their electronic data. The GDPR, the privacy still directive, still not a regulation, and the role of national regulators that supervise what you can do as a telecommunications company, as an ISP, with electronic communications. We have a long history of European Court of Justice case law that's very explicit about the limitations of monitoring people's surfing behavior and of intervening in that, mainly in the context of data retention legislation, where it's been explicitly stated, we cannot in the European Union have mechanisms that monitor and retain the communications history of European citizens. That was in the context of data retention for criminal investigations. It's not generally interpreted to have much impact on DNS, but it is one of those things where if you're a DNS provider, you're generally grateful that people don't look at you too strictly in the context of that type of jurisprudence. We have fundamental rights concerns. Some of you pointed that out already in the questions. So pretty much all member states have mechanisms, have rules in place on filtering and blocking malicious domains, harmful content. That's not regulated at the European level. Member states do not want that at this point. So this is something where the rules are different from country to country, what the process is, what the safeguards are, how you can appeal those, what is made public and what is not public. Most countries are not very transparent on how those decisions are made, and certainly not on what type of URLs or what kind of domains, which kind of IP addresses are being blocked or filtered, for very obvious reasons. You don't want to publish a list that basically says, look, here's where you can find all the illegal content. So there's good reasons behind that. But from a fundamental rights perspective, any form of DNS management that involves not just evaluation of risks, but blocking malicious attacks and filtering domain names is inherently going to be contentious because of the European Rights Framework, Charter of Fundamental Rights, the Open Internet Access Regulation that defines that in principle, filtering options are legally constrained there. We have our cybercrime and cybersecurity rules, Cybersecurity Act with its rules on cooperation in case of incidents, and the emergence of the Cyber Resilience Act, and other tangentially related legislation that isn't, actually none of this is directly relevant to the DNS, but that are even less directly relevant to the Data Act and the Digital Services Act. Digital Services Act, which generally is interpreted to consider DNS providers as mere conduit providers. So there are some constraints there on how far you can intervene if you want to benefit from the liability rules of the mere conduit regime. AI Act, if we go into automated pattern detection, automated filtering, the DORA regulation, information security and financial services, child sexual abuse materials legislation is being proposed there. So there are tons of cogs that come together in a project like DNS4EU. And it's important to recognize that the way those rules apply already to the DNS, leaving aside, ignoring for a moment what DNS4EU is doing, is already very vague and very ambiguous. There are already a lot of practices out there, including a lot of domain name filtering and attack detection, that can be criticized from the perspective of multiple legislations. It's treated generally, I think it's fair to say, as implicitly lawful. Domain name filtering, domain name blocking happens. As the colleagues have pointed out, DNS providers already run fundamental protections to be able to determine when their services are being used maliciously. But it is very unclear on how that actually matches up against the existing legal framework. We don't exactly have clear harmonized rules for that at the European level. We have a very broad bucket, a very wide range of legislation that all affects tiny different aspects of how the DNS operates, but nothing that comprehensively settles how the DNS works. There is a political conviction right now, a policy conviction, I should say, that there is need for intervention at the European level to make sure that the DNS is more secure, functions in a more homogeneous way, and in a way that improves the European sovereignty. But we have to stay within the framework of that legislation. The DNS4EU project has been announced as a project that wants to develop new technologies and make them available. But, and this is in response also to one of the questions that was raised when asking, how do you force everyone in the European Union to use the results from a project like DNS4EU? That's not even on the policy roadmap, and at any rate, it's not something that we, as a project, could impose. We can only develop the technologies and explain why we think that the work that we're doing is lawful. That's obviously a big question. We need to explain that we're at the very least not doing worse than existing DNS systems, and also provide suggestions on how you can move this forward. So how you can strengthen the uptake of a project like DNS4EU across the European Union. So you can see a couple of big lines there emerging. The EU agrees that there's a desire to have more control to protect European sovereignty, to also protect personal data more effectively, to have better governance over cybersecurity monitoring and filtering of unlawful content, and to provide more transparency to citizens, because fundamentally, most citizens have no idea, and arguably shouldn't have any idea, how the DNS functions. But if you would want to find out, there should be ways of figuring this out other than conducting comparative studies across the different member states. And this is, I just put a quote there from the NIS2 directive because it's an interesting one. It's one of the few legal frameworks that explicitly calls out DNS providers and explicitly targets them, noting that they are essential entities that have to apply an all hazards approach to managing their risks. And it's interesting there because the recitals, it's not in the actual obligations, says that ISPs are to be encouraged to adopt DNS resolution diversification strategies. So this is again recognizing that we shouldn't be relying purely on DNS providers, especially outside of the European Union, and that member states should encourage the development and use of a public and secure DNS resolver service. Not a legal binding obligation. It does not say member states have to force ISPs to use DNS4EU, but there is a clear encouragement there already in this directive, which you can use sort of as a venue, as a trigger to force member states to take action, to adopt approaches like the DNS4EU project. So what do we actually do then? What can we actually contribute? Because that's all pretty clear. What can we do and what are we doing? So it's important to point out DNS4EU is not a company. It's not an organization. It's not an ISP. It's not a DNS provider. DNS4EU is a consortium that develops technologies that can be piloted, can be tested by various stakeholders, including ISPs, governments, and later on to private users as well. We are figuring out how this can be offered in a way that is compliant with data protection legislation, because that's the main sort of question, the main concern that we have, where we have to explain that at the very least, the approaches that we have with DNS4EU are superior to what is being done under the status quo, under the existing DNS mechanisms. What we also do is look into and evaluate local monitoring and filtering laws, so looking into what member states can already do in terms of detecting and addressing malicious content. What we cannot do is change legislation on that. So if you say, well, who determines what is malicious content? That is largely a matter of national law. There is some cybersecurity legislation that tries to harmonize that at the EU level, but it's very limited. Largely, that's a national matter. We cannot change that. What we can do and what we are doing is identifying relevant laws, procedures, policies, redress mechanisms. That question was asked, so we're looking into how is this done from country to country. Not in order to be able to say, so this is how it works everywhere, because that's not a realistic objective. There is not going to be a common mechanism that is applied across the member states, even based on the limited knowledge and insights that we have right now. We're also already seeing divergences, for instance, in how transparent the procedures are and what the outcome is. We can chart, however, what is actually going on, look at the trends, the major patterns, and explain why the use of DNS4EU is legitimate, and also what would need to change in the longer term. So what we're focusing on, data protection compliance, explaining how, in our view, the DNS4EU project can be used already in a lawful manner, compliance with national and European legislation, and explaining the benefits. This is very trivial stuff. This is just explaining why we are not breaking the law. So it still has to happen. And we can explain how we work with public authorities. There's a question that was also raised in the chat. Just to be clear, I can't see the chat right now, so I don't know what questions have been added since I started. But people also asked, will you actually respond to requests from, for instance, from police, from national security organizations, and how will that actually work? Again, I have to explain there the basic constraint. DNS4EU is not a company, so you cannot ask DNS4EU to hand over specific logs or to block specific actions. You would go directly to the relevant stakeholders, for instance, to an ISP who is using our services. You could target the consortium as a whole, but most of the consortium partners don't have much influence or ability to respect that. It's also not our ambition. Might change in the future, but by and large, we don't have any ability as a consortium to run this ourselves. We support partners who want to use our technologies, but the rules are not changed. So there's no additional new venue by using the DNS4EU where you can say, oh, now I used to have to respect national legislation, but now I have these guys, I can target them and I can circumvent them. No, that's not possible. We have no legal mandate to do that. We have no option for doing that. So those are things that we can do. What we're not going to do, again, we can't change legislation. We can't harmonize rules. We can show why we think we are operating in a reasonable margin of appreciation of existing legislation. So we can explain why we think what we are doing is within the limits of the legislation. But we can't change, we can't create a margin of appreciation where there is none. So if people want to start blocking content and there is no legal basis for it, we cannot help them with that. And we do not want to help them with that. That's not something that we can do as a project. Also, and I try to stress this because, like I said, the DNS system, since its inception, is contentious from a legal perspective, since there's a lot of mainly academic discussion on how awful all of it is, how far you can go from a data protection perspective or from a censorship perspective to monitor people's communications and to intervene in them. A lot of academic debate. What we won't do, and that's a line that we drew early on, we're not going to defend the DNS system as such. Our goal is not to explain why the DNS is lawful. Our goal is to focus on the delta, the innovations that we bring. Our goal is to explain why DNS4EU does better than traditional non-DNS4EU DNS services, not to justify why the internet should work. That's, this is not an academic research paper. People are free to have those debates. It's very valuable, but that's not what we want to do. What we hope to do, and this is sort of my closing slide here, I hope, yes, I'm more or less within the time. What we can do is explain why a project like this is, in our view, again, this is an opinion, not a fact, in accordance already with European legal requirements, so that you could use the technologies that we have within DNS4EU, could adopt them immediately, explaining that you're not worse off than under the existing DNS mechanism, and providing best practices for adoption towards ISPs, and saying, if you want to adopt a mechanism like this, here's how you should do it. Here's how, for instance, you should inform, how we think you should inform your customers. We're not taking over responsibility. It's an ISP, you're free to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not listening to your best practices. You don't know me and you don't know my national legislation, but at least we can try to help there. But more fundamentally, and this goes to the question that was also asked in the chat, how are you going to force people to use this? We can't force people to use this, but we can explain in the course of this project, hopefully, that it worked, why it worked, how it worked, under which constraints it works, and to explain some possibilities for future policy action in order to further adopt this. Like I said, the idea is not to say this is, a theoretical project that you can't use until legislation is changed. Because, and if there's only one thing that you remember from this presentation, it should be that there hasn't traditionally been a lot of legislation on the DNS to begin with. You don't necessarily need it. What we need is an agreement that solutions like DNS4EU are already defensible under European law, and then to explore what options that you have at the national level, at the European level, to encourage further adoption. And again, we can play with things like, for instance, the NIS2 directives suggestion that member states should encourage the adoption of technologies like this. This is something that we can use to talk to policymakers at the European, at the national level, to regulators, to NRAs, for instance, to help us promote the outcomes, assuming that, of course, that our testing is successful and that we have a convincing story around that, so that people have more faith that a solution like this could work. I've put as an option here mandatory uptake. You could I guess, under national legislation, adopt laws forcing ISPs to use this kind of European DNS4EU, either as their principal service or as a backup solution. But it's not something that we can do in the course of this project, or even that I'm convinced is a smart or necessary thing to do. Not everything that's a good idea has to be legislated. I think, the internet has taught us one thing: it's that you can do useful things and productive things without necessarily having legislative intervention. I think if we explain that margin for using DNS4EU already exists under current legislation, I think we can already alleviate some of the concerns, and this can become a de facto standard in the European Union, even without specific legislation around that. That's all I want to say, because I'm also, I see that I'm out of time. So I'm Hans on the left-hand side here. These are two other colleagues, Esli and Anubuti, who are also supporting the legal work in the project. If you have specific questions or concerns or suggestions, all of which are welcome, you should, of course, feel free to contact us about that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hans, very much for your presentation. There is so many questions in the chat, so I would kindly ask you to go through the questions, and if there's a chance to answer at least some of them, if you have time, it would be very helpful, as there's so many interesting and insightful questions, which is great. And as we're moving on within the webinar, we have the last presentation here, and it would be account executive at Wellbone, Lorenzo Bracci, who will talk about the implication of the project for the ISPs. So if I may ask, Lorenzo, if you can share your screen and tell us more about the implication for ISPs.
Yeah, you're sharing, right? So yeah, just do that.
Cool. Thank you, Magdalena, for the presentation. As a first step, I want to introduce really briefly Wellbone, the company at the head of the DNS4EU consortium. So Wellbone is a cybersecurity company headquartered in Brno, and the headcount during Q4 2023 was of 80 people, but we are planning to be 125 in the near future, in 2025. We are the global leader in telco consumer security, and we offer 3 different products for 3 different kind of customers. We have Aura, which is the product meant for big telcos. We have Peacemaker, the product for regional and small ISPs. And last but not least, we have the product for corporates and governments called Immunity. My colleague Adam already explained why DNS resolution is important and why it is like an elegant way to filter the malicious traffic. And before diving deeper into the value point for ISPs and for Peacemaker, I want to talk a little bit more about the market leadership. So at the moment, we are present on a global scale, and we are trusted by 350 plus telcos and corporates. And we are part of many associations which are currently shaping the internet, like
Sorry, one small intervention.
Well, they're currently shaping the internet, like the Encrypt DNS Deployment Initiative. We are part of the GSMA, just to remember. We have 5 stars review on Capterra. We have been elected like one of the fastest growing company in Central Europe, and we are also part of ISP association like EuroISPA. All right. So regarding one of the things which is the best is that our customers are happy to interact with us and to endorse our product. For instance, in this slide, you can see some of our telco customers. And regarding it, I want to suggest you to if you have the occasion to read the white paper published during Q4 of 2023 by Arden Stans, which is about telco strategies for consumer security. And Arden Stans is a leader in cybersecurity research and provides trusted research, analysis, and insights in IT and telecom security. And during Q4, they compared different vendors in this market, like Akamai, Allot, F-Secure, SAM, and Whalebone. And what is great is that they perceive the market understands like them how we do, and they see similar growth path. And what is great also, and what is clear from the white paper, is that Whalebone has the highest number of telco deployments. Moving forward, these are our customers, and these are our ISPs customers. And it is great for us to show them, and both the small one like Marikiet.com, a small ISP from Scotland, but also more established company like NEAS from Norway or Royal Cable from the Philippines. In the last slide, I will show you a nice comparison between two different approaches that we have seen between NetSurf and NEAS. Why I say that? Because based on my interaction with the dozens and dozens of ISPs, I see that most of the times they see the DNS as just purely a commodity. But we know that the DNS can be leveraged as a tool to improve the security, the reliability of the service, to provide better connectivity, better performing internet, and to avoid all the issues related with the DNS. So it is a good example to showcase how some of our customers are using it. Peacemaker, which is, as I said, the solution for ISPs, provides for them a really important tool. It is really good to get rid of customer complaints, bad user experience, churn rate, and the solution is complementary technology to other security features, right? And it will really improve for our customers the internet experience. And on top of that, can also help ISPs to comply with mandatory filtering, ensuring that the services provided align with industry and legal standards. One of the features that we provide is a capability to block some kind of content, mainly the contents which are related to child sexual abuse material, which is not just an ethical responsibility, but often is a legal obligation, right? And in the slide on the top right, in the bottom right, you can see a screenshot from the portal, which the admin of the SP can have access. And with just one click, it is possible to block some specific kind of content. And Whalebone capabilities to block such a kind of content is, of course, really important to stop the usage of malicious domain and no malicious domain, but also content domain related with child sexual abuse material, and to stop spreading it all over. Right. As I promised you in the last slide of my presentation, I want to show you how some of our customers are using it. On one side, on end, we have NEAS on the left side, which is offering safe surfing. And it is a great tool for them because they are offering for free for all of their customer base. And so it is included in the subscription. And it becomes the first layer of security in addition to the customer own antivirus, anti-malware. And it is a great tool for child as well. And this shows that for us, the ISP of the future is not just the one that provides connectivity, but it is also the one which is able to secure their customer, to differentiate from competitors, and to lead in the digital area. And on the right side, we have different approach, but similar strategy, okay? So this customer is offering the additional value of Peacemaker, so faster connectivity, secure connectivity, content filtering capabilities, parental control, as a bundle with other services in order to, again, differentiate from competitors, but also as a way to boost the ARPU, which is really important for ISPs. So using a DNS server with malware filtering is also a way to showcase commitment and to find new revenue streams. So this is the end of my quick formal presentation. My hope is that you have taken away not so much about the Whalebone capabilities, but also my experience and our experience with dozens and dozens of ISPs globally. That they have taken what can be seen as a commodity like DNS service, but using more advanced services, they are able not only to improve the security posture of their company and of their users, but also to boost the RPU. And yeah, and in general, ISPs that will join the Whalebone, they will also take advantage of the shared threat intelligence, which is a great feature to have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lorenzo, for your presentation about the implication for ISPs. It was very nice. I can see that we have so many questions in the chat, and I'm happy that Adam and Hans are both replying to the questions, and I'm happy that we have so many questions raised from this webinar. Just as we have few minutes, Hans, are there any questions that are repeating, and it would be worth to sum it up to express some comments on this?
Yeah, the main ones that I'm sort of commenting on are basically questioning, isn't this sort of the EU regulating something that's working perfectly well without regulation, and also sort of in parallel with that saying, then shouldn't they actually be trying to avoiding this type of system, because if the intervention here is going to be regulated at the European level, then am I not worse off? Then my government is going to be watching me. Which this is the heart of the DNS discussion, and I think the bottom line is if you feel that like the mechanisms, the DNS systems that you have available for you give you enough protection and privacy, and that you are convinced that they are not intervened in by third-party governments, then indeed something like DNS4EU probably isn't very much of interest. And then the main thing that you should take from this session is, look, I'm happy as long as I don't have to use that. But a project like DNS4EU is based on the European policy conviction that we cannot depend on those kinds of sources, because we don't know what interventions are actually being applied towards those DNS resolvers that are outside of the European Union. So I think to me that's an interesting one. So if you say I don't trust this, I don't trust certainly not the EU, but actually also not my member state, I don't want them to intervene in that, then you currently still have the open DNS resolvers, and there are no plans, just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding about that, there's no plans to forbid any of those in any legislation, at least that I have seen. The idea is to offer an alternative. But people say, I am not interested in your alternative, there is no value there, then DNS4EU clearly is not for you, because it's intended to address that policy concern. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for your reply. Well, I would like to thank our three speakers for their time, for their presentation. I hope you found it insightful, and I would like to thank you on behalf of Whalebone and on behalf of EuroISPA as the co-organizer of the event. I would like to express my gratitude for your attentions, for your questions and comments. Thank you very much. We will go through the questions that we hadn't time to reply. And of course, if you want to know more about the project, as mentioned before, we have the website, join-DNS4EU, and you can reach out to us with your questions. If you want to discuss more, we would be happy to discuss it on our channels with our consortium members. And of course, we have our stakeholder group So I encourage you to join this stakeholder group, and you'll be informed about the progress, about the events, and about all the news that we're doing within the project. So once again, thank you very much for your time, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.